What's going on, boys? Quinn69 here, yet again. I've just got done watching the Diablo 4 Part 2 live stream and reading the 10,000 plus word patch notes. Now, I did skip a little bit, all right, because Jesus Christ, it was a lot. But yeah, it's basically spent 4.5 hours looking at all the new Diablo stuff coming for Season 2. And let me tell you, they got some really poggies changes. And then also some really, I don't know, less than poggies changes. Let's just put it that way. So I'm going to try and go over all of the stuff at kind of more of a macro level and then talk about what I like and what I don't like. So let's start off with a banger. Resists. They have fixed resists. When I say that, they've basically taken a system that should have never, ever been implemented into an ARPG ever. It was complete trash, literal dog shit. And then they've taken that and they made it into an insanely cracked, really good system. AKA, they got PoE resists. So what I mean by that, if you haven't played PoE, when it says you get 10 resists, you just get 10 resists. And then you get another 10 resists. Now you got 20. And it reduces the damage taken by 20. And it stacks additively to a point where there's a cap. And now with the D4, the default cap is going to be 70%. And then you can also increase that cap, which, I was like, whoa, D4 doing max resist? That's kind of advanced, guys. I don't know. Are you sure they're going to be able to handle that? You know, because remember, this is the game that started off with attack and defense, guys. So they're giving us maximum resists that go up to 85. I love this change, and I'm not going to shame them for it. So anyone who's sitting there talking and be like, man, they're just copying PoE. Bro, of course, that's fucking good. Yes, if they want to take inspiration, from other games that have good optimization, I'm totally down for that. So please, don't sit there and scorn Blizzard for doing something that is one of the best changes they've made in their game in a long-ass time, okay, guys? They did go on to say they wanted Resist to be a puzzle to solve, which I'm totally down for, and I always go on about, ARPGs literally are that. You have a build, it's got a bunch of problems, you have to solve these problems to get it online, and that's the feeling that feels really good, right? Like trying to make a certain set of skills and items work in a way that is unique, and it feels really great to do. And Resists are basically a really, really simple puzzle. Then at the same time, they kind of contradicted themselves and said, we also want to have a fail-safe to ensure players have a minimum amount of resists. So they're just arbitrarily putting resist on all rings and amulets. So then people will always have a level so they just don't die. Why? Just let them die. They should just go out and die and then realize, hey, I have to get resists. That's called mastery of a computer game. Okay? And it's contradicting your whole thing about puzzle solving. You know what I'm saying? They also made another massive change. Another change that I said they should make, and the game should have launched with this. Armor, instead of just giving you global damage reduction, aka defense, but renamed to armor, now gives you physical reduction, which is great. I like that. It's thematically correct. I would like to see armor reworked a little bit differently, maybe, hey, just, have a look at the notes, from that other game, Path of Exile. Maybe have a look at that armor in that game. Flat reductions, I'm talking. That creates really interesting dynamics. But hey, massive step in the right direction. Huge W. The resist rework, absolutely love it. You can also get max resists from elixirs, from uniques, all sorts of things, maybe even on the Paragon board, where you can get max res. They buffed those stupid incense things, so they also give you max res. Lots of ways to do it. I'm assuming it is going to be possible to get 85 max res, and that probably will, be very meta, especially for the higher tier stuff in the game. Because if you don't know, chat, max res is OP because of the way the maths work. They also made a bunch of changes to damage buckets. Okay, and now if you're wondering what that means, they're just talking about different multipliers. And this is where I'm kind of less excited. And honestly, I feel like these changes they're making are band-aids, and I think they're like a side grade, or then. Let me just explain what it is, and then we'll talk about it. Basically, what they're doing is they don't like how OP crit damage is, and they don't like how OP vulnerable is, and then also overpower was just trash, so they're just buffing that. And what they've done is they've just said, hey, guess what? If you crit, it's a 1.5 times multi. Always. It just multiplies damage by 1.5. Now, you can't increase that. It's locked. That's how much it is, 1.5. It is what it is. Vulnerable. When you hit a vulnerable enemy, you do 20% more damage. You do 1.2 times more damage. That's it. You cannot increase that. Overpower, which the rework they're putting in is literally whenever you overpower, you do 1.5 times the damage. It's like crit, but like renamed. And then it has a little bit of increased damage added on top. When I say a little bit, like 200 to 300% increase. Remember, that's additive with all other things. Damage to the hit based on your health and your fortify, but whatever. It's basically just a renamed crit. And what this means is you cannot sit there and stack crit multi and vulnerable damage to then use 2 multipliers to get like insane levels of damage. And they've taken the damage range of potential, like if you min-max your character hardcore from like here, and they're squishing it way down, and they're kind of homogenizing damage output. And do you know what games they do this in? They do this in World of Warcraft. And what it means is, it means it's far easy for them to have little knobs to, predict, everyone's going to be within a pretty narrow range of damage output, so we can balance encounters and we can balance things more accurately. Which I feel like kind of goes against ARPGs, in my opinion. Not a fan of these changes. They're Band-Aid fixes. What they should have is many other ways to specialize and min-max your character, and and many different ways of building it that are competitive with getting vulnerable, with getting crit multi, with doing all these things. And so there could be like 15 or 10 different ways of getting damage for your character, but you can only pick 1 or 2 to min-max. Not this, let's just make everything arbitrarily this amount, and you just, everyone gets it. Now, to give them a little bit of credit, they also are adding in a system here where basically they're adding in Paragon board changes where they're allowing you to get certain stats of just non-multiplicative damage. For example, it could say increased damage to distant enemies and increased damage to close enemies. I hate both those stats. I don't think they should even exist, but this is the example they gave. Those stats now, a percentage of them, so say you had like a total of 200% increased damage to distant and 200% increased damage to close enemies, you're now at 400%, and it says, guess what? 50% of that is now multiplier. So that means you would now do 200% more damage. Does that make sense? That was obviously an extreme example, and you probably wouldn't have that many stats. I'm just kind of winging it here. But what that is going to mean is you're going to have these random things on your Paragon board that are going to make you farm arbitrary stats. So, like, say your one, I saw, like, for example, for druids, one of their multiplier ones is damage to crowd control enemies. So you basically, what it's going to do is it means you are going to now, instead of being hunting for vulnerable on all your pieces of gear, you're going to be hunting for damage to crowd control enemies. And then that will be like a different source of multiplier, which I feel like this is lazy game design and is honestly kind of dog shit. But hey, it's a little bit better than having, you've seen the list of potential damage increases that D4 has, and they all basically, damage to close enemies, damage to enemies that are low HP, damage, all these things. It's all the same shit, just with slightly different conditions, like damage to slowed enemies, damage to crowd control enemies. It's all the same. So now instead of like, guess what? They're all just the same thing. Now you have one line of text, one affix that will then become a multiplier, and it'll be kind of maybe more exciting to find that piece of gear. Again, I don't think this is how they should have fixed it, but this is where they're going. Oh, and I forgot to mention, you are going to be able to get stats that say increased damage to vulnerable enemies. But what that means is, it doesn't mean like, they're going to take more damage, as in the multiplier goes higher. It's just another source of percent increased damage. Just like you're going to be able to have your critical strikes deal increased damage. It's not going to add crit multi. What it's going to do is when you crit, it just does more damage. Yeah, again, I think this change is a total side grade and doesn't really fix much. And I would like to see them fix this by just giving players more ways to build their character, honestly. They are adding a lot of other sources of multipliers as well. So they're going to basically give us more Paragon things that just say, your Earthquake does 20% more damage based on how many earthquakes are up currently. They're just going to give us many sources of multipliers, kind of like a little bit like Diablo 3-esque, but with far lower multipliers. All I'm going to say is, if you're going to do this and add in a bunch of little miscellaneous multipliers here and there, try and make them, class agnostic. Try and make them, based on tags and not just create pseudo set bonuses within our Paragon board. Because that's just ultra bedge. It's just that, I have to get this mandatory damage multiplier for this skill. Because it says Earthquake does 50% more damage, whatever. And also, if you're going to do that, please accurately label the damage as, because right now in the game, there is like a little bracket after a damage increase, and it'll either have bracket X or bracket plus, which is supposed to indicate either multiplier or plus, but currently, for druids, it's not accurate. There's a bunch of things that say they're multipliers when they're not, and there's a bunch of things that say they're additive when they're multiplicative, which is just like, fix your game! They then went on to uniques, and they basically said uniques are all dog shit in the game. Unironically, that's what they pretty much did. They're doing a huge pass, and almost every unique, not all of them, but almost every unique in the game has been updated with new stats. They're trying to make them have bigger rolls than you can normally get on normal items to make them more unique. They're trying to let the uniques ignore item slot rules. For example, a unique weapon could have cooldown reduction when you normally can't do that. And they're trying to have unique effect damage. So like the unique could say like damage to crowd control enemies. Instead, just says damage to enemies or damage to with fire damage, whatever. They're trying to make it non-conditional. So they're trying to incentivize them. And they're just trying to make uniques way more OP because they want you to just get excited when you see them drop on the ground. And again, do you know what this gives me? D3 vibes. Because ideally, a unique is a competitive choice of an item because it allows you to do some unique interaction that you can't do with any other item. But they're trying to go with some things that are, unique, and then other things that just, this weapon just does way more damage. Like if you are using upheaval, then you have to use this weapon because guess what? It just says upheaval does 200% more damage. They did this in Diablo 3 where, for example, the balanced Diabo, if you played Tempest Rush, you had to use that because it just arbitrarily, they just slapped on 200% Tempest Rush damage. And it's like, please don't do that. Nobody wants that. In my opinion, anyway. In my opinion, a good unique is a unique that maybe it could have some unique stats that are kind of interesting, maybe like some cooldown reduction, whatever. But the main feature of a unique should be something that augments the way an ability plays in a very special way. Now, they actually showed an example where if you had Hurricane up and you tossed out a boulder, it would fly around your guy and do in circles, which, in my opinion, that's good design, right? It's not just saying your boulder does a ton more damage. It just says it rotates around your character. Now, if they slapped on 200% boulder damage to that unique, then it's just like, well, if you're playing boulder, now you have to use this thing, and it's forced. And, that just removes player choice, removes player agency, removes player builds, which I'm not a big fan of. Another big thing they're doing with uniques is they're basically allowing us to target farm. They showed all of the uniques and where they drop from. You could just look up a list. The TLDR is Duriel is completely overpowered. He drops some of the best uniques in the game. And then on top of that, he also drops the fucking Uber uniques. These are only boss that drops them, by the way. The Giga Uber uniques. They even mentioned again, they reiterated, like, no, you will know people who have uniques, the ultra rare Uber uniques. And guess what? If you find them, you will get them. So they're basically saying it's going to be pretty fucking common. Which I'm starting to wonder, have they gone too far the other way? And are they going to kill the idea of a Uber unique? And everyone's running around with the Uber uniques. And guess what? It's mandatory for builds because, you can just find them out realistically. I don't know. That's just a question I'm posing. They made a bunch of class improvements. They made Fortify scale a little bit better, so it scales off your maximum life instead of your base life. And all that means is you just get Fortify way faster now. They are giga nerfing OP stuff. They didn't, quote-unquote, predict, which, again, red flags come up massively. They said they are fixing unintended interactions. Which, what does that mean? Does that mean like all the cool unique builds that they didn't plan for, like which basically hardly any of them exist in the game, and they're just going to remove them because, hey, you're not playing the game we want you to play the game? Or are they saying, hey, we're going to remove the builds that are like completely broken and insane? Because right now, there is a massive problem in the game, and that is lack of builds. So the idea that they're like, oh, you're not playing the game we're playing, like, we want you to play, we're going to just remove that from the game. That is Monarch-esque, and I feel like that is the literal opposite of what they should be aiming for. In the dream world, they're going to be creating many opportunities to have many unintended interactions that all can pop off in many different ways. But I agree, if something's completely trivializing the game and breaking it, and you're just like one-shotting the hardest bosses in the game, and you're just completely annihilating everything, of course, that should be, stuff that's way out of line should be nerfed. They basically said, yeah, we're nerfing Bone Spear Necros, we're nerfing Barbs, they're fixing all the Barb OP bugged builds that just one-shot everything. They're nerfing Druids, like giga nerfing, like Druids, the one that gave the one that said, like, you get 1,000% more crit hit damage, it's now 200%. We are 1/5. I mean, it's crazy. But in saying that, with all these nerfs, they are adding a bunch more multipliers into the game. But then at the same time, they also nerf vulnerable and crit damage. But at a macro level, they said they're trying to rebalance the game around all these changes, and the game should be, relatively speaking, slightly easier, even though your characters are going to be doing far less damage, because they're rebalancing all the monsters and the bosses and everything around that. Which, fuck, maybe. We'll see how that goes. They're buffing Barb Paragon boards, because some people weren't using the Paragon boards. They're buffing Wiz Paragon boards. They said Rogues OP, and we basically don't need to change their shit. Classic. Fucking Rogues, right? Rogues. They also said Druids are OP, and they're not making many changes. That's fake news. Druids aren't OP and needs buffs, okay? All right? And they're the highest skill class, and everyone knows that the people with the biggest dicks play Druids, okay, guys? They're making a change to pits globally. So that Necromancer passive that you only have to spec 3 points into that says pits can never take more than 30% of their life in a single hit? Well, now that got redesigned, and then every single pit in the game, including Druids, pits, all that shit, has that passive. So the idea is that pits aren't just going to get fucking owned. But I tried pit builds. Not even in super high content either. And the pits were just getting decimated. So what does that mean? They're just going to get decimated slightly slower now? Like, I don't know. I feel like Druid pit builds are an archetype that need to be looked at massively, because it looks like they're trying to allow you to do that, but I don't see how this change is going to fix that. It's not enough for Druid pits, in my opinion. I guarantee you, Druids, even with this change, and high GRs, I'm talking like, over 100 plus, with the pit build, are just still going to get owned. They added armor to shields for necromancers, which is, hey, that's kind of a W. They also mentioned some pretty PogChamp stuff, and that is training dummies. Like Chris Wilson, step aside. Chris Wilson, it's over. They are adding in training dummies, okay, to the game. And they are not only doing that, they're doing the World of Warcraft thing where they're allowing you to have like a multi-target training dummy, a boss training dummy, all sorts of different training dummies to allow you to like test your builds, test your interactions, which is just fucking badass in my opinion. Holy shit. Now that is not coming until 1.2.1, which is going to be like a few weeks into the season. They're also doing another thing that's going to come in a few weeks into the season, and that's the Paragon board reset, which I don't know why that's taken so long, considering they already have items that allow you to reset your Paragon board. Surely they could just add a fucking vendor in that lets you buy the item. But I mean, whatever, dude. That's coming in a couple weeks into the season. They also did a little bit of QA, and they said, what did they say? They're basically just going to try buff dog shit skills more. And they have. I looked at the patch notes. Yeah, a lot of the skills that were underused and underperforming are just getting buffs. Now, they don't always want to buff them with damage, which I totally can get behind that, because, if an ability, you should have abilities that are good in niche cases and abilities that are good because they have good utility. And they don't always need to be damaged. We're not trying to remake Diablo 3 here, guys. They also mentioned they don't want to, and they can't add overpower without ruining overpower to channeling skills because of the way channeling skills work, because they snapshot, and they said it's impossible. But why not just make channel skills not snapshot? It seems like there's so many issues with channeling skills, snapshotting, aka Barb's Whirlwind, having problems, like not being able to hit monsters inside circles, being able to snapshot insane multipliers. Like, just don't make channeling skills snapshot and just let them go on a tick basis, and then they can't overpower. I don't know. it seems like bad coding to me. Old mate Adam reiterated multiple times that there is going to be huge stuff happening at BlizzCon. Huge things. So they're basically going to announce the new Diablo expansion at BlizzCon, like 100% confirmed, with lots of stuff. So I'm going to be watching that live on stream whenever that happens. Not going to physical BlizzCon because it costs like $800 and it takes like fucking days to get there and back. So screw that. It's not worth it. It's a literal scam. But I will be watching it online, and I will be, live giving my criticism or giving, pogging out to hopefully all the good changes they're going to make. They're going to buff basic skill builds because they're not quite happy with where they're at right now. They said basically sorcerers and necromancers are just going to be overpowered when it comes to gearing for resists because of the way intellect works, which is badass. They mentioned shout barb gameplay still isn't fixed, and it's still trash. And you still have to spam shouts if you're playing a barbarian. So, yeah. Enjoy getting RSI barbarians. They mentioned that they want to make glyphs more class agnostic. And then they showed examples of a bunch of glyphs that were not class agnostic. I don't understand. They were kind of contradicting themselves a lot here, which kind of made me question mark, what are these guys even on about? In total, there's 18 new uniques / legendary powers in total. And then one more thing is Uber Lilith is getting nerfed. They said they want most builds to be able to beat Uber Lilith, which, I don't know. I feel like Uber Lilith didn't need to be nerfed. Like, relatively speaking, it just needed to be fixed so that the fucking animations lined up with what was actually happening, because in my opinion, the animations are totally bugged. All right, bro. Fix your game, Blizzard. Overall, the resist changes, massive W. Itemization changes, they leave a lot to be desired. I mean, I honestly want a full itemization rework. But whatever. Itemization changes, I think it's a fucking side grade. Season 2, though, compared to Season 1, is way better. But Season 1 was complete dog shit. So where does that leave us? That means Diablo 4, right now as it stands, is less bad. But it's still bad. So, but, who knows? We drag this out a bit. Season 3, Season 4, Season 5. Maybe Season 7 we'll have like an average game. We'll be popping off. I mean, I'm excited. I feel like this season's at least got minimum 4 days of gameplay in it. Minimum. Maybe even a week. Get your PogChamps ready. I hope I'll see you guys there. I'll be live streaming every second of it. Until next time, boys. Peace the fuck out. Have a good day. And I will see you in the next video, boys.
Because he is God.